Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. We looked at the youth sector this morning. Now we're looking at the business sector. Owners of small and medium enterprises in South Africa seeming to be divided over whether the upcoming national election will result in market stability this year. A survey by business partners indicates that 40% of SMEs are expecting the elections to have a positive impact. 35% of them are uncertain and 25% believing that the market will be impacted negatively. For more on this, we're joined and we'd like to welcome Busi Mavuso. She's the Chief Operations Officer at Business Leadership South Africa. Thank you so much for making the time this morning. Business is a very important component of the South African economic cycle. Yeah. What are your expectations of what's going to come out on Wednesday?
Yeah, so I think our forecast is not so much about Wednesday, because for us there is already a foregone conclusion. It's happening in the next 48 hours.
It can't be foregone though. You've looked at the different promises of the different parties. Which parties make better sense to business in terms of stability for the country?
You see, the focus ought to be what is the international market expecting from South Africa. And the reason why I'm focusing, and as business we're focusing on the international market, is precisely because to get ourselves out of this economic quagmire, to get ourselves out of this period which is termed the West post-apartheid economic crisis, we have agreed that we can't do it by ourselves. We need foreign direct investment. So if you agree that we need to be positioning this country as an attractive investment destination, we need to say, what does that look like? What is the posture that we need to assume?
There's also a need to grow the local business cycle, isn't it?
So, but then remember, all of that, just like with foreign direct investors, the issue is the policy environment conducive for businesses, local and international, to be able to inject money into the country? So local and business investors actually alike are looking for the same thing, and that's policy certainty, and at the moment, with this mooted, contentious issue around property rights, we are very worried as business. We are worried that the independence of the South African Reserve Bank continues to be, an issue. We are worried that what does Section 25 of the Constitution, in as far as the land is concerned, mean? If we are going to amend it, what does that mean? What does that do to property rights? Because you are not going to invest your money into any country when your property rights are not protected. We are worried about prescribed assets. What does that mean? Are my and your money now going to be dictated to in terms of where it's supposed to be invested? And look at what the SOEs are doing. I mean, the government is exposed in as far to the tune of 670 billion government guarantees. The major risk that we're currently facing in this country is that of default risk. We saw 2 weeks ago when Tito Mboweni had to run around and try and find the 7 billion to ensure that, he rescues Eskom out. So that is what we're worried about. And in our view, everything stems from policy certainty, because once you get that right, then you're going to get investment, both foreign and local, that is actually going to flow. And once investment flows, then you're going to get aggregate output increasing. Once you get aggregate output increasing, that you're actually going to get growth. And growth leads to jobs. Jobs starts dealing with the issue of poverty, unemployment, and inequality.
Your argument would work very well if you were talking to other politicians or to other business people. But if you were talking to the EFF, for argument's sake, and sensing from what you have said that you have a bit of disagreement with the way that they're going, but how would you engage with them?
But you see, the EFF is going to have to come up with policy, or whatever party, policies for the country that we have, not for the country that we wish we had. So their manifesto, unfortunately, is pie in the sky. Because South Africa, it is, and unfortunately that is a fact. Unfortunately, because South Africa needs help to get ourselves out of this economic quagmire. You therefore, for you to be able to deliver on that manifesto, you're going to have savings to be able to say, how do I ensure that from a government perspective, I lift the country out of this economic crisis? But we can't. At the moment, we know that we're sitting with 14.6 billion budget deficit, which means South Africa continues to live beyond its means, which means that whatever it is that we are collecting in terms of tax revenue is not enough for us to be able, to do whatever fiscal programs that we actually have. The current characterization of South Africa is that we have 17 million people that are dependent on some form of social grant or the other, and 7 million people who earn enough to pay taxes. The focus of whatever political party needs to be, how do we grow the 7 million? Because this formula is unsustainable. We cannot continue on this trajectory. So we therefore agree that because our tax revenue are not enough, to be able to sustain ourselves, then we need an injection. And if you need an injection, then you have to posture yourself so that whoever wants to inject can see you as an attractive, investment destination, as it were.
But as Business Leadership South Africa, part of your mandate
absolutely
is to think as broadly as possible to represent as big a population as possible, especially considering that some of the people that you don't reach out to might be aspiring business people, and to say what alternatives can we find?
So that is why our focus at the moment is we are ready to give whatever party ascends into power the focus that needs to be looked at after, the 8th of May, which is sector revitalization. You need to be looking at what are the industries, what are the sectors that are actually job absorbing. And why job absorbing? Because the characterization of the South Africa, economy is that we have a lot of unskilled and low-skilled, people. So you need to get people into jobs. You need to be looking at manufacturing. You need to be looking at tourism. You need to be looking at agro-processing, because those industries don't need high-skilled laborers. Get people into jobs, because by getting people into jobs, Desiree, then you start dealing with a 37% unemployment in terms of the expanded definition.
Let's talk about the things that the solutions that you're putting forward are not anything new. They've been spoken about over and over again. Let's talk about why they have not been implemented.
It's the focus. You see, the business of government is to ensure that they deliver and put in place policies that are going to advance this country.
I'm going to ask you to just hold on to your thought there. I'm just going on to another crossing in India, where we are talking about the latest regarding elections. And for more on this story, we cross live to our India correspondent, Neha Punya. Neha, very good morning to you. How is the turnout at the voting stations this morning? I suspect that Neha is not able to hear Johannesburg. Neha, I'm going to take another attempt and try and say a very good morning to you. This is Desiree from Johannesburg. Are you able to hear us? All right, we're going to go back to our conversation.
It's the phase of polling here in India, and we're almost nearing the end of this massive 7-phase election. All eyes are going to be on the bellwether state of Uttar Pradesh. There are only about 14 constituencies going to polls, but it's crucial because you've got Congress President Rahul Gandhi, who is in the fray. He's represented Amethi for over 14 years. This time, though, he's not just seeking another term as a parliamentarian, but perhaps as someone who could become India's next Prime Minister. You've also got BJP's Smriti Irani, the ruling BJP's leader, who's against him. She's claiming there's a lot of anti-incumbency on the ground, that she will defeat him. In the 2014 elections, she had reduced his vote margin by 100,000 votes. This time she's claiming she's going to ensure that he doesn't win in the Congress stronghold at all. Amethi has always been with the Nehru-Gandhi family, India's first political family. The Congress and Rahul Gandhi is going to be hoping that that tradition continues for this election as well.
A strong female contender there.
Yes, absolutely. He's considered to be a strong contender. He's pitched himself as an alternative to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And he's essentially fought this election as someone who can replace Prime Minister Modi here in New Delhi. His key pitch to voters has been that, look, Mr. Modi promised you millions of jobs in 2014. He's not delivered on that promise. He promised to double farm income. That's not happened. I can solve all those problems for you. So he's promising to implement a minimum income guarantee of one.
Neha, if you...
Is about 60% of India's population. So these are the promises that he's made to these voters.
Neha, from a country where voting only takes one day, take us again through the process of this complex Indian election and why it's spread out over so many weeks.
I can't hear you very clearly, but if you're asking me about how complex this entire exercise is, it is mind-bogglingly complicated. The preparations begin months in advance. You've got at least 10 million polling officers who are stationed at various polling stations across.
All right, it's a story that we think is very important. India is one of the BRICS members, so its activities, especially in terms of voting, have an impact on business relations in South Africa. We're trying to talk to Neha Puna there, but the connection is not so great. As soon as we're able to reconnect with her, hopefully we will continue that conversation. But that was just an update there on the India poll. And coming back to our conversation with Busi Mavuso, who's the Chief Operations Officer of Business Leadership South Africa. And one of the conversations that will take place is South Africa's relationship with BRICS countries and the impact on business. What conversations is Business Leadership South Africa having around this particular issue?
So I think the conversations there need to be strengthening ourselves as a country, strengthening ourselves from an economic perspective, from an institutional perspective, and from a fiscal perspective. Because if we don't do that, then unfortunately we become the weakest link in the BRICS, constituency, as it were. So South Africa needs to be internally focused at the moment, to say what is it that we need to do to get ourselves out of this quagmire. So to your point, before we went to a break, where you were saying that why is the things that we know very well ought to happen haven't happened? Desiree, our view as business is that this ANC-led government and whatever political party comes into power is going to have to stop playing in the sea of mediocrity and start taking non-populist decisions. You see, the business of government is to make tough choices, and unfortunately, the ANC has failed to do that for the longest time. The reason why we find ourselves where we are, it's a crisis of their own making. So they are really going to, because the tone is set from the top, so they are really going to have to be very decisive in terms of giving the direction that we need to actually, go to as a country. The other big, issue that we have inherent discussion with in this country in terms of positioning ourselves as an investment destination is that of labor. In this renewal project that we've embarked upon as a country, what is labor as a social partner bringing to the table? Because you see, the status quo can't remain. They can't continue doing what they've always done and expected different results. They can't continue in this economic crisis to call for 11% increases when the CPI is only 5%. So if we all agree that as the four social partners, government, business, civil society, and labor, we have to bring something to the table to move our country along. What is labor's contribution going to be? And what is all our contributions going to be? So it's going to have to be clear. Hence, I'm saying that the business of government is to make tough choices. And unfortunately, this ANC-led government has failed to do that. So we're hoping to see that after the 8th of May, because unfortunately, the reprieve and the stay of execution that we've been given by Moody's is actually very temporary.
Are you not worried about consensus, though, in the kind of approach that you're talking about?
But you see, we need to have this discussion around the table and come to some sort of agreement. If we all agree that our vision and our focus is the same, which is to get ourselves out of this West post-apartheid economic crisis, we are therefore going to have to say, what are the 3-4 things that we need to do? And in those 3-4 things that we need to do, what is our role as the four social partners going to be? And move forward in that direction.
Thank you so much for making the time and talking about businesses' expectations of the 6th government that's coming in place after Wednesday here in South Africa. That was Busi Mavuso. She's the Chief Operations Officer at Business Leadership South Africa.